Welcome back to the Iron and Attention podcast, where strength is built on purpose, discipline is non-negotiable, and what you build is supposed to hold up when the pressure hits. Today's episode is for the men and women who run towards chaos. They carry the responsibility long after the call ends, and they're expected to stay strong no matter what the cost. First responders are trained to manage risk, control the scene, and perform under stress. But far too often, no one teaches them how to recover, reset, or protect what's happening internally. That's what today's conversation is about. Our guest today is Travis George, a retired law enforcement professional, public speaker, and advocate for first responder wellness. Travis has spent years working with first responders and their families, helping bring attention to part of the job that doesn't show up in training manuals. That's mental health, emotional resilience, and that long-term weight of the work that we have. Travis is also involved with the upcoming First Responder Mental Health and Wellness Conference coming to Kansas City, Missouri. That's a 2-day event focused on giving first responders and their families real tools, real conversations, and real support around mental health and resilience. This isn't just a motivational talk. It's not a buzzword or checking boxes. It's about standards. It's about sustainability and making sure people who protect everyone else don't slowly lose themselves in the process. In this episode, we're going to talk about what first responders are really carrying, what wellness actually looks like, and why conferences like this one matter, and how discipline, not avoidance, is often the missing piece. So let's get into it. Travis, welcome to the Iron and Attention podcast. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about Travis George and what the mission you are on right now is?
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate you having me on today. Absolutely. So I spent about 27 years in the Kansas City metro area working as a police officer. And I always knew that after about 25 to 30 years, I wanted to look at what my next chapter was. What's life beyond law enforcement? Because let's face it, today I'm not so sure we're equipped to do this job much past 55, if you will, as that is the most common retirement age for first responders. So in my ventures outside or considering what my next move would be, I had an affinity for retirement planning, financial wellness, investment management and such. And not really because that's always been my affinity, but really more because of some of the situations I was facing at the time, going through a very difficult divorce, struggling to understand my budget and how I was going to pay attorney's fees and such, facing a very significant life event that kind of propelled me into needing to understand money better. And so that kind of walked me into my next phase of life. Whereas the wellness component, as you know, when I was retiring or leaving or considering leaving, wellness was really starting to just be a discussion we were talking about, not necessarily something that had an active program built within a lot of the departments like it does today. But one of those components that is still left out significantly and has not been discussed like it should be is financial wellness and understanding how money and finances impact the overall emotional health, the resiliency perspective of police officers trying to navigate the complexity of working shift work and having difficult, challenging lives with the job that we do today. But how money really is one of the most underlying and probably not talked about components of overall wellness. We can talk about health and resiliency and fitness and mental health, and those things are all super important, which is the main focus of the upcoming conference in October. But all these components of wellness are interdependent upon with each other. If you don't have one, another one suffers. So it is very important to have a discussion around all components of wellness, in addition to the fitness, stress management, and the psychological component, because they do all rely on one another. To have, if you're looking for that total sound and body, mind, and wellness component that we're striving for, with all of the day-to-day things that hit us in this job of being a police officer or a first responder in general.
What's one thing that you've seen either on the job or after you retired that made you realize wellness can't just be an afterthought? It has to be something that we work on now.
Well, Tommy, you and I have been in this job a long time, right? And if you look back kind of on years past, when you first started, it was just keep your mouth shut and do your job, right? Be tough, suck it up. You're a cop. Cops have, we're ironclad, right? We aren't affected like the rest of the general public. I heard something the other day, and it was unique in the fact that I was at a conference listening to another speaker, and he said most people in their entire lifetime have 3 to 5 traumatic, critical type events or critical situations that impact their psychological well-being, if you will, or they catalog those. Those are, maybe sexual abuse as a child, or having an alcoholic father or mother, or, witnessing a suicide or something like that. And that, generally speaking, across the US alone, 3 to 5 in your entire lifetime. Police officers see 3 to 5 on a monthly basis, and that is impactful. Right. And we haven't talked about it. The military's done a good job of addressing it over the last 15 years with, being overseas and a lot of the soldiers coming back and seeing a lot of those PTSD issues with the military. But law enforcement, first responders, I see it as a slow trickling over a long career. And so it can sneak up on us when we least expect it. So 20, 25, 30 years on the job, even though we're not in combat day to day, these events we're witnessing, these horrific situations that we see on the street and in our communities will take its toll on the human mind. We are not invincible. We have a heart and a mind just like everybody else does. We all have the same DNA, if you will, but it does affect everybody differently. It's, are you willing to say, hey, number one, my department has a great program and I can trust that I can reach out to somebody and not be judged? And number two, are you actually taking the steps to recognize and admit, you know what, I could use some help? Or, hey, I need to get better about my fitness. I need to get better about what my day looks like. Am I deep breathing? Am I going to the gym? Am I practicing meditation? Am I exercising my faith? All these things are super important. I think we've done a good job as a whole bringing awareness to this today. But like I said, that one component I think that does kind of interlay with everything else is that financial wellness, which I'm so passionate about, and I talk about and have talked about all over the country for the last 4.5 years.
Well, it's a great point. And I will tell you that I've seen, and I have been this guy that gets out of the academy, and what's the first thing we go do? And you see it across all the emergency services. We go buy that big truck, we go in debt, and then it's just that vicious cycle of not only working your normal hours, but picking up those overtime assignments so that you can fund that life. And we see that time and time again. I think that, and we'll talk a little bit about this conference, but I think that that's really key to overall wellness that's not really addressed. And I'm glad it's starting to really be addressed by guys like you and this company. Tell us a little bit about this Kansas City First Responder Mental Health and Wellness Conference, and who is it for?
Yeah, so great question, Tommy. And I echo all your sentiments. Actually, probably the first 15 minutes of every venue that I speak in about financial wellness, it's just that. We want to buy the truck, we want the image, we want the house, we want the car, whatever it is, right? Because we got to keep up with the Joneses. And I'll talk more about that. But the First Responder organization the president CEO is Sean Thomas. Sean is a retired deputy from up in Washington State. And she's one of the first, probably front runners in this space to really get the word out there through her conference and what she does. And she has a collection of amazing speakers who've been just there, right? Whether it's dealing with depression, alcoholism, anger, whatever form of PTSD, whatever form of stress and pressure, to bring awareness to the first responder community, and not just police officers and firefighters, but wellness practitioners are there to be a resource and help understand the mind of a police officer. Dispatchers, corrections officers, everybody that works in the public space that deals with the public on their worst day is a perfect fit for this event. She hosts these in cities all over the country, and I have been one of her speakers for the last couple of years. And, we have developed a great friendship, a great partnership. We share a lot of information together, and the work that she is doing in this space is remarkable. She has touched lives, and you can't put a number on that. The value, just getting cops, firefighters, and first responders to think differently about this and recognize there's great resources out there. And there is also the stigma that we have to squash and get rid of that stigma out there, and that it's okay. Hey, I've got somebody I can reach out to, or I've got a list of resources that I can tap into to kind of help me navigate the situation I'm going through in life. And so, in addition to this conference with a bunch of amazing, awesome speakers, both inside and outside of the first responder profession, we have a whole entire group of resource partners that are also there in the room, collaborating with the participants, collaborating with the speakers, and really exchanging a lot of good ideas, building relationships, and are able to connect a lot of those dots. You may remember back in the CIT days when that first kind of started, and talking about crisis intervention and how can we get some of the people and constituents that we work with and serve connected with resources, right? Well, if you take that and add the first responder component, now we're doing that for our brothers and sisters in public safety. And so we're helping them connect with those resources because they need somebody too, right? Our community needs our help. We're the first line of defense, but our people serving need those same resources.
Yeah, we have to take care of each other. We have to take care. As a leader, I've prided myself in taking care of my people as best I can. And sometimes that's difficult, but we have to generate those resources and we have to be an advocate for them using those resources. Otherwise, they are going to get into a position where they're making poor decisions. And I've seen so many careers ended because they're not addressing root causation of those issues. So I'm looking
Absolutely.
forward to this conference. What can people expect if they attend this conference? What makes this just more than just another conference?
Well, I will tell you, Tommy, and I absolutely have always kind of had an affinity for listening to people like Tony Robbins speak that are motivational, right? That you hear things that can resonate. And a lot of times when you're in a conference setting, you hear something, you may know it deep down inside, but if you hear somebody else has experienced it and it resonates, right? It may not be brand new information. It may be new brand new information, but sometimes just hearing it from somebody that walked the same path and has walked in the same boots you have, talk about their experience is just enough to get you to let your guard down and let you be comfortable and let you, know that you're not alone, right? That you struggle just like your partner and your friends and your colleagues, and hearing those stories of resilience. And then the beauty of it is that what comes on the other side of that, right? And so I was really, really, really at my worst and going through, and I always say it in my presentations, I think some of the most challenging and difficult experiences that we go through in life, whether on the job or off the job, you can choose it to let it shape you and make you better, or you can live in the past and dwell on it. And, we can't change the past. So really there's no alternative, in my opinion. It's learn from it, grow from it, and become a better person for it. And if you can take it from that perspective, judgment is off the table, man. Like, take it as a challenge to learn and grow.
Awesome. Give us some time and locations, details about this conference.
Yeah. So this first ever Kansas City conference is going to be at the Embassy Suites by the airport, October 1st and 2nd. It'll be 2 full days. You'll have an opportunity to meet colleagues from all over the Kansas City metro area that you may have crossed paths with. I know we're a very large metro area with a lot of local and municipal departments, so you may be able to connect with some of those folks you haven't talked to or seen in a long time, maybe you worked a case with or something like that. You'll be able to meet and understand what some of the resources are in the Kansas City metro area that you may not have any idea are available for you. And, a lot of those, meeting and networking components, they also have evening events where they're going to have a meal, and they'll have some cornhole tournaments, those kind of things. You always have those kind of after events where people can socialize, get to know each other, and it's just really going to be a day full of a lot of great collaboration. And there's some cool prizes. There are going to be some giveaways, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity to win, the raffle. Every time you go to a conference, you can buy some raffle tickets. So there's going to be that opportunity as well. But we do all eat together, and everybody gets to hear the same speaker. So it's not like I got to choose between one speaker to the next. So I feel like I'm going to miss something. Everybody's in the room at the same time listening to the same speakers.
Who are the right people to attend this? Is this line level people, leadership, spouses, chaplains, clinicians, dispatch? Who should attend this?
Everyone should attend this that touches public safety in any way, shape, or form, to include brand new officers, to include chiefs, all line level, all departments, all aspects of police work. As you know, we obviously wear a lot of hats in this job. Anybody that is in the public safety space and works with the community in any way, shape, or form would be a great candidate. To include the spouses, we will always encourage, even if your spouse works in the corporate sector or works outside of public safety, we would always encourage your spouse to attend with you.
Why Kansas City and why right now? What's the need that people are seeing across our region?
Well, most of Sean's conferences that she hosts are, that she's built relationships with a lot of public safety entities across the country, East Coast, West Coast primarily, and we haven't seen a big presence or push in the Midwest. Right. So a lot on the East Coast, Maryland, Delaware is popular, a lot in Washington State and California, Idaho. I've spoken in both sides of the country, but we do not have and have not had a big presence here in the Midwest. So, and she's like, well, you're from Kansas City, like you're plugged in, like let's bring something to the Midwest and start to expand this. I think we're going to try and do Omaha next year in 2027.
Awesome. Well, I think it's great that you guys are bringing this, and I applaud you and Sean both for taking the time to bring it to the Midwest, because these are real issues here. They're real issues all across the country, all across the world for first responders. So thank you very much for bringing it to us. Looking at this, what are some of the top mental health and wellness challenges that you see consistently for first responders and their families?
Without a doubt, and I guess I'm kind of a little bit biased, but I have a lot of conversations with police officers and firefighters that are stressed about their budgets, how they're going to pay their bills. Unexpected medical expenses is huge, right? Most Americans today can't even put a new refrigerator in their house without having to get a loan or put it on a credit card. Right. And so we have, as a nation, become accustomed to debt and lack of margin. Right. And so again, it feeds. There's a statistic I have in my presentation. For those Americans over the age of 32, 60% of the stress in their lives comes from money problems and debt. And so, again, that just feeds the animal, right? And our government probably isn't the best representation, federal government, on how to balance a budget, right? So we become accustomed with living beyond our means. And anytime you live beyond your means, everything becomes an emergency, right? Every time something happens, it becomes an emergency, right? A refrigerator going out, a washing machine going out. My dog, I have to get $300 a month medication for my dog, or my motor went out in my vehicle. These are situations that if we create some margin in our lives and be more responsible with how we spend money, living on less, then we can face these challenges, number one, and not have to work 200 hours of extra duty that month to be able to pay for it. And we have some margin in our life to we're not accumulating debt, right? And then getting ourselves upside down, ruining our credit, can't buy a house, whatever the situation is. So, I speak in depth on these topics because they do feed the other components of wellness, right? They do. And stress comes from a lot of different resources. In my world, I see a lot of stress coming from money issues.
Everything that you're saying is, I can look back throughout my career and see the poor financial decisions that I've made that led to that stress. And stress at home, whether you want to admit it or not, you take that to the job with you.
Absolutely.
And it makes it a more dangerous situation. So I'm glad you speak on that. Let's talk a little bit about resilience, and let's talk resilience beyond just the buzzword. Everybody wants to talk
Sure.
resilience, but how do you define it in a way that we can actually train our folks to be more resilient?
Well, I think for one, we have, there's a lot of talk in the health community, health sector today when it comes to fitness, diet. You can talk about it all day long. We think cost of healthcare. We have wellness checks and all these things that have to help mitigate insurance or help mitigate cost and claims through your local insurance or your department's insurance. The problem is those premiums are continuing to go up every year, and we're getting sicker and sicker and sicker despite all the effort to try and reduce sickness. And without going into great detail about my personal opinion with prescription drugs and the medical community and the this buzzword or the buzz discussion about keeping us sick, right? I think that we have to take more closer look at what are we doing and what can we do as individuals to help promote our mental health through fitness and nutrition. I will tell you that older you get, as you know, it don't get any easier, right? The body breaks down, the joints hurt, right? It's hard to get out of bed. If you can how often do you feel like before you go to the gym, I don't want to go to the gym, I just don't want to, but you go, I don't want to go for a run or a walk, but you go and you feel better afterwards. We've got to change our behavior. We got to start making those things. It needs to be a daily habit. What am I going to do today to get my heart rate up, to do my breathing, to make a good meal, a healthy meal, right? To keep my weight off, because out of shape poor fitness, poor healthy habits, being, addicted to sugar, all these things really do affect our ability to fight through the resilience component, right? And kind of fight those battles. You fight a battle healthy than fighting a battle sick. Is it's no different than going on the battlefield. You don't want a 400-pound infantryman out there trying to rescue his buddy in a firefight when he can't even breathe and he's sweating profusely and he feels like he's about to throw up, right? It's a much tougher to fight that battle than if you take care of yourself, because mentally, and read a study on this the other day, 70% of our physical energy comes from our brain, right? So our mental strength and our mental energy directly relates to our physical energy and energy output. So get those components fixed, that piece of it, and the resiliency piece on the job, right? You'll be more effective at mitigating that stress and those exposures to some of that, the day-to-day that we have in our industry.
Let's talk to the leaders that may be listening, the leaders inside this first responder space. What role do they play in setting that standard for wellness, whether they mean it or not?
They need to, I mentioned earlier, there was a stigma, a significant stigma back in the day. I think if they, leadership is everything. If they communicate from the top down that we will have the ability, or we will open up our door to make ourselves available if you're struggling with something, without feeling judged, without feeling like you're going to be put on light duty, or, making, hey, I'm struggling with this situation or that they create a culture that allows for that conversation to take place. Because once they've created a culture to allow for that, then it makes it much easier to be able to get the resources and get the assistance that you may need, depending on whatever your situation is, a budget counselor, a mental health counselor, a fitness coach, whatever it is, that they say, hey, you know what? We're here. We want you to get better. Everybody struggles. We get it. We've all been there. We want to make our culture allow for that.
I think that leaders need to be vulnerable in front of their people. I think they need to discuss their struggles. I mean, there's a certain line there that you have to draw, but I think people need to know that leaders struggle as well. And there's things that stress us out. And I think that as someone who's been a leader, I've been very intentional about sharing things with my staff when I struggle, because they need to know that their struggles are okay. And
Absolutely.
I think that we have, as leaders, we have to make that culture not like it was when we were young officers, where, if you went and told somebody you were struggling, you got put on the rubber gun squad.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was a term in the Kansas City area. It was in the St. Louis area. And it that stigma followed you. And I think we're really starting to turn the corner on that.
Yeah,
As an
I
occupation,
agree.
as a career field. So
I agree, absolutely. And I will tell you too, because, it's tougher today to find good qualified people to do this job. And partly because not as many people are putting in for the job. And, there's obviously a lot of social media, a lot of that stuff that's happening out there that we're watching, incentivizing people to want to be a police officer, want to be a firefighter. The last thing you want to do is bring somebody in and make them feel like they can't have resources when they need them.
You've talked extensively across the nation about financial wellness as part of an overall well-being for first responders. Connect these dots for us. How does money stress show up as mental stress?
So I'll give you an example. So our brain, when we are operating, and I know you've heard this in your world as well, the fight or flight, right? We run to the fight where other people's run the other way. And so we operate in that fight or flight pretty consistently as police officers and as first responders in general. And so if your body has learned to adapt to those cortisol dumps, if you will, and how to mitigate some of that, if we are constantly in our personal life always operating in fight or flight, it actually reduces our brain capacity and our ability to rationalize and think logically by about 15 to 20%. It reduces our IQ. So if we're always operating, and every time some kind of financial situation surfaces and we're always in an emergency or a fight or flight trying to figure out how we're going to do it, not only are we Are we learning to manage it on the job? Now we're taking it home in our personal life, right? And so it's called the dopamine effect, right? It feels good. I always ask in my conference, how many of you are stress shoppers when something goes south and you go out and you want to pick up the phone and look at Amazon and go, hey, I want that. And the drone drops it on your front porch the same day. These things, albeit short-term decisions, have long-term consequences. It may feel good right now, but we don't get there overnight. We go make these purchases and spend beyond our means and don't save in our retirement accounts. And then when something goes south, we wonder why we're stressed. We wonder why we're having difficulty, why we're depressed, why we're anxious, because we make short-term decisions that have long-term consequences. And like you said earlier, the brand new truck, the brand new house, having to play the comparison game. We get in the comparison trap. We also get stuck going to Starbucks every day and spending $8 on a coffee. What does that look like after 2 months? If anybody went back and looked at their bank statement to see how much money they spent out eating and buying coffee as opposed to packing your lunch or running to Chick-fil-A or whatever it is, like those things add up. And it's not something that occurs overnight. You sneak up and you go, oh, crap, it's been a year and wow, I was supposed to be paying that credit card every month, but I started, my budget kind of fell apart and I had this unexpected expense that came up. And next thing you know, now I'm paying 28% interest on a credit card and I paid 10 times as much for it that I should have. And so it's habits. How do you create better habits and learn not to react emotionally to everything that comes up in your personal life? And we can't think about retirement. We can't think about the next chapter if we're constantly in fight or flight, operating at lower brain capacity because we're trying to figure out how to pay for something or we're trying to soothe our pain through things.
Travis, you've presented at numerous conferences on the pathway to financial wellness. What's that wake up moment you see when people finally get it?
Freedom. Money is not about happiness. Money's about freedom of choice. It's to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, with whom I want to do it. And you can't create freedom with money if you're operating without margin, right? If you're operating in the fight or flight. Because I will tell you, you'll never know what it feels like to be financially free, to get to that place where you decide, you know what, I think it's time to do something else. Or, you know what, I want to take that trip, or I'm going to buy that vacation home. And we have it backwards. In our 20s and 30s, we're behaving in a way that we don't know how to understand instant or delayed gratification. So we spend it all now, we get to retirement, and now we're paying for it because we're trying to figure out how to get out of the hole. It's the other way around. It should be in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. I'm pounding the pavement. I'm living on less. I'm max contributing to my retirement accounts. I'm buying used vehicles, right? I'm creating margin in my life. So when I do get to retirement, right, and I've taken care of my body like I'm supposed to, now I have the ability to be able to choose what I want to do. With my spouse, with my loved ones, I want to, support my grandkids and take them on a cruise or whatever the situation is. This is the time in life where you're supposed to be able to reap the benefits of those years and years and years of hard work. And we have it backwards. And so I always say it, you're going to pay now or you're going to pay later. So you make the choice. So that is probably the biggest component, I think, that if there's any takeaway, is create freedom to choose. Warren Buffett says it all the time, so does Charlie Munger, right? You can't operate inside of long-term thinking if you're always in a day-to-day emergency trying to figure it out.
Man, that's powerful. What are some of the first steps that first responders can take this month that would reduce that pressure fast without needing to become a financial expert?
Well, I think too many of us aren't operating in a budget, right? And so if you know what you're spending every month, if you can understand, I need to be allocating a certain percentage to 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high yield savings account. There's a lot of great high yield savings accounts out there that are paying 3 to 5%, right? Not at your local bank making less than 1%. So that emergency funds, those 3 to 6 months of living expenses, if something goes south, it's there and readily accessible, right? Get that threshold we call a launch pad is $10,000. $10,000 in a high yield savings account, and it's off the table. It's for emergencies only. Right. And then you have to start looking at, am I paying too much in credit card debt? Am I paying a lot of people use it for airline points and hotel points, but are you truly paying it off at the end of every month? Because if you're not disciplined enough, then you should probably cut those credit cards up. Because I've seen it so many times. They've done really good for 3 or 4 months. You get to about month 6 or 7, and you realize, oh, I didn't have a budget, and I'm not able to make that full payment every month, and I start making less than that, start costing me interest. And so if you can get out of debt, right? Home and cars, right? Most people are going to have a mortgage. A lot of people are going to have car debt. We're talking more about high interest credit card debt, right? Eliminating high interest credit card debt. Having some margin, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high yield savings account, paying 3 to 5%, right? You got those two things checked. Then after you're starting to save there, you want to be able to save in your retirement accounts, right? How much out of that? So 10 to 15% in a retirement account, locked away for life. You're not going to even consider looking at it or needing it, not using it for a down payment on a house or a loan for your daughter's wedding or something like that, right? This is retirement money for you to use after you decide to walk away from the job or stop working altogether. And so if you can, a lot of folks too, they're givers. People want to be givers in retirement, right? They want to give to churches, whether it's pre-retirement or post-retirement, or charitable contributions, setting up college funds for their grandchildren, right? All these things can only happen if you learn to pay yourself first, live debt-free, right? Create margin in your life, save money, right? And have the ability to not have to have it right now when you want it. You have to delay it for another day. And you got to learn, is this a want or a need? And if it's a want, it's time to reconsider it for another day when I can afford it, right? Take a look at your budget. How much are you spending on stuff that, subscriptions, Netflix subscriptions or music subscriptions, those kind of things too can eat away at your month to month that you don't even realize.
Let's get back to the conference. How can somebody that attends this conference, what can they expect in terms of being able to bring something back to their department that actually sticks?
I think that there's going to be great opportunities, in particular if you don't have a good, sound wellness. A lot of these larger departments today are starting their own wellness units. These are full-time cops working at full-time capacity, creating a resource. And I would tell you that, budgets are tight, smaller agencies or such, it's probably not something that's ever going to happen. But, some of these larger agencies, KC Metro, Kansas City, Missouri Police, they have their own wellness unit now. And I think there'll be great resources to help people get started on creating at least some kind of wellness component within their departments. They'll have the resources and the contacts to be able to do that if they don't already have something up and running, or if they're trying to put something together.
Travis, how would you, or what would you put on a list, one habit for every first responder that's non-negotiable, something that would create margin in their chaos?
Gosh, without repeating what I already said multiple times, learn delayed gratification. And learn the difference between a need and a want. And you can start doing that. You'll start finding you're going to be eliminating a lot more things than you actually think that you have to have, that you really don't have to have. So I think that'd probably be the number one thing.
So let's talk to maybe our generation of cops and first responders, and maybe some of the younger ones as well, who, they see this conference is going on and they say, I don't need that. I'm fine. I don't need it at all. What do you say to that?
I think that we have perceptions that are based on a lot of our culture growing up. And, depending on what you witnessed, you see police officers out there that had the perfect childhood growing up and, they've always wanted to be a cop. They played cops and robbers when they were kids. Or you see police officers out there that had a traumatic childhood and they get into this job because they don't want to have what happened to them, so there's kind of a Superman component to it, right? So I think that if you can just kind of learn to get outside your own blinders for a minute and just hear what somebody has to say. And how many times, Tommy, have you heard, you've already got a bias or perception in your mind, but somebody else, you heard them speak or heard them talk and they completely change your perspective. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me in my lifetime. So I would say just give it a chance. What's it going to hurt? It's 2 days.
Where can people go to get details and register for the Kansas City?
So there's a link. If you go to firstresponderconferences.org, I think it's .org or .com, there's links on there for registration. There's one on there specifically for Kansas City. I can send that to you too, and you can circulate it in your network. And you just go in and fill out the form, the registration form to sign up. They're also offering hotel discounts for those that may be coming in from out of state or out of town as well.
Final message, Travis. If a first responder takes one step towards wellness this week, what should it be?
Tell your spouse you love them because you're not guaranteed the next day.
Amen. So, folks, here's the truth, and it's not always comfortable. Strength isn't about pretending you're unaffected. Discipline isn't ignoring what's building up, and resilience isn't surviving at all costs while quietly falling apart. The job demands enough. What Travis has reminded us about today is that wellness isn't weakness. It's maintenance. It's preparation. It's how you make sure the person doing the job today is still standing 10, 15, and 20 years from now. If you're a first responder listening to this, you don't need permission to take care of yourself. You need intention and the discipline to act on it. If you're a leader, understand this. The standard that you set and wellness, or the lack of it, is always being watched, even when it's never said out loud. Conversations like this and events like the First Responder Mental Health and Wellness Conference in Kansas City, they matter, not because they're convenient, but because they're necessary. So don't wait for the burnout to force the issue. Don't wait for something to break. Do the hard things and do them on purpose. Travis, thank you so much for being with us today. I encourage everyone, build strength that lasts, protect your mind like you protect your body, and live with intention on the job, at home, and everywhere. And to everyone listening, this is Iron and Intention. Show up stronger tomorrow than you were today.